When we're talking about armed forces, I've got to ask you about the spring offensive, summer offensive, uh, fall offensive, counteroffensive. Was it more successful than everyone thought? What kind of metrics are being used to judge success? And I'm mentioning that because what's happened in the Black Sea and how Ukraine, without a navy and without really heavy air support, has been able to drive the Russian Navy pretty much out of the Black Sea. However, the media seems to really be focusing on moving lines on a map by Bakhmut. So, was the counteroffensive more successful than we thought?
That's a very good question. In my view, possibly not. I think it was. I think it was doomed from the start. To be honest, doomed because what the Americans were trying to get Ukraine to do was something they couldn't do, and they couldn't do it simply because the people were not trained sufficiently well.
Okay, you got to help me out here. You know, I'm not a military person.
Well, okay, you take people to Britain; they have 10 weeks training. Okay, to do an operate. So 10 weeks they are leaving primary school. Okay, a counteroffensive is a PhD operation. That's it. That's it in itself. You've got to go through that many years of work and understanding. Your generals have got to have that many years of understanding. Your colonels, your lieutenant colonels, everybody's got to be on the same page of doctrine and of training, and they've got to be at a high level to do this. 10 weeks or 20 weeks in Britain, it doesn't even scratch the surface of training required to do something like this.
Okay.
And so the troops that were put in were just simply not sufficiently prepared in any way, shape, or form to undertake this operation.
Okay, I'm going to fight you here. I know that you were in Ukraine advising on interoperability. You were working with the military. Your advice was if you want to get into NATO, you have to act like you're in NATO. And they had been acting like they were in NATO for what, at least 10 years?
No. Oh, yeah, at the top, talking like they're in NATO, not acting like they're in NATO.
Okay. Let's take this a step further then. They want to get into NATO.
Yeah.
The top is talking like they're in NATO. And maybe the counteroffensive wasn't as successful because the things NATO does are usually with air coverage. Were they?
This is a nonsense discussion.
Okay, help me out.
Okay, they didn't have air cover. But what you have to remember is that there are no NATO tactics. There are only tactics. Okay, tactics is the ability to, in an area, to beat the enemy. That's it. Now, whether you go in from one side, whether you go in from another side, whether you go in straight, you have to choose the best route. So there are no NATO tactics. So a choice of what to do. If you haven't got air cover and the other side has got more drones than you, then you do not attack. You don't do it. You just don't do it because you're going to die. Or you have to work out how you can do it like at night if the enemy hasn't got very many drones with infrared. And you have to learn that. So you have to have intelligence on what you're going to do. Then you have to choose where you're going to attack. Now, if you choose to go into attack in the place that is the strongest defended, then that does not make any sense to anybody. Now, if people want to blame that on NATO and say, Americans do that, then I'm sorry, that shows a weakness of the commander on the ground, because the commanders on the ground, the general, should have said, no, there is no way we can do this. Not in this way, not in this fashion. They shouldn't have even started. You should have gone somewhere else, should have attacked somewhere else where it's weak. One of the areas, there are areas where there are very few Russians on the other side, and they should have attacked somewhere there, not into the strongest area. So, you can't blame that on NATO. The decision for where to attack and when to attack is a Ukrainian decision. And that Ukrainian decision, and even when they did attack, they did not attack in force. And that is not NATO, that's doctrinal for any war anywhere. Concentration of force is a principle of war. If you want to break through, you have to concentrate force. And Ukraine did not do that. It actually went in force weak, even without air cover. Air cover is just one of the arguments. But if you haven't got air cover, you don't attack there like that.
So what explains these decisions? Is this going back to not having the PhD in war?
Yeah, one big thing is not having the level or being, I don't know, maybe being frightened by the American advisors who gave advice that whatever advice they gave, whether it was followed or not followed, I don't know. I mean, they might have said do this and it'll work, because none of us know what advice was given to them. But it's clear that the principles of war were not followed. That's a fact, and that's a Ukrainian problem. That is not an American or NATO problem. You can't blame that on NATO. NATO can only give advice. America can only give advice. But anybody in their right mind that wants to do a counterattack with troops with minimal training, where the leadership has had very little time to learn how to work with the troops, 10 weeks is nothing. It's just nothing.